I don't think we need a recording of just both screens. Now, what we're doing today is continuing what we did yesterday. If we get into the right set of lesson slides. We're continuing with factoring. We're continuing doing what we did yesterday. Now, I'm going to write out the steps. Why don't I write them out here on the board? Because I did write them out on the smart board for the other 2 hours, so that's in the video. I'll put it in here so it is contained in the video. Our first step was greatest common factor. Our second step was 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. And exactly, step 3 is find the sign. If third term is positive, then both signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. Middle term. If third term is negative, then opposite signs. Because if the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Which brings us to step 4. Try that again. We want to find the factors of the first and third term. And last but not least, step 5 was plug and check. And those are the steps that we used yesterday to factor, and we're going to be using them today, and we'll be using them tomorrow. The only ones that we really won't have to use these on are some of our special factors that actually have a method to them, that there's a set kind of rule for those. So we look at this first one here. The first main thing we should be looking for is a greatest common factor. So is there a greatest common factor between 8x squared, 56x, and 48? And we're really dividing each one of these by 8. Well, 8x squared divided by 8 is 2. And we would factor it out because we want to pull out the greatest common factor first. Bless you. Now that the greatest common factor is out, we'll move on to step 2, which is our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. So when we find the sign, we look at the third term. If it's positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If it's negative, the signs are opposite. So since the 6 is, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which is, so it would be negative and negative. So that takes us steps 1 through 3. Step 4 is factors of the first, and the factors of x squared are and x. And we just go on and throw them in because there's only one set of factors for x squared. Factors for 6. 1 and 6, or so we can do 1 and 6 first. And last but not least, we need to check it. Now, as we saw the other day, well, we don't need to do x times x because obviously that'll get us back to x squared. Or 1 times -1 times -6 because that'll get us back to positive 6. Because we got them because they are the factors of x squared and 6. So they should always multiply back together to give me this here. The main one we need to check are these here. X times -6 would be -6x. -1 times x would be, which gives us a total of -7x. Is that what we wanted? Yep. Now again, we're not looking back at the -56. We're mainly looking back at the -7x. Because the reason it went from -56 to -7 is that we factored out the 8. Because whenever we factor something out, we're not looking back at the original, we're looking at the one that was the greatest common factor was pulled out. So this does work. Because if we really wanted to, 8 times -7x would get us back to -56x. So this is the factored form. Questions on this here? We ready for the next one? Or do we feel comfortable with these here? We feel comfortable with this? Okay. Well, if we feel, so we don't need to see this one here. How about this one? No? Okay, that's fine. This one here, I mean, these here are working exactly the way that we worked them yesterday. There's nothing any different than this one. Or this one here. Let's just go on and look at this one. I mean, there's not anything different to it because it's going to work out the exact same. Because we will actually hit something that is different today, okay? Is there a greatest common factor? Okay, so 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. The 5 is negative, so the signs are positive and negative. The signs are opposite. Because when the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. When the sign of the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. One's positive, one is negative. Which brings us the factors of the first and third term. So the first term is 4x squared. Well, 4 is 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. But x squared is x and x. So even though we don't know the factors of 4, we can plug in x and x. We know that's going to go there. What are the factors of 5? Are there any others? Might as well just put in 1 and 5. So what factors of 4 do we want to try first? So 1 and 4. And last but not least, we're going to check it, distribute. X times -5 would be -5x. 1 times 4x is plus. So we can switch 4x and x. Because as we can see here, in this setup, we would get -1x. Well, we need -19x, yes? So we switch the 4 and 5. Now, 4x times -5 would be negative. 1 times x is plus x, which gives us negative. Is that what we wanted? That's it. Any other questions on this here? We feel good with this here? So that there would be the exact same. So let's look at this here. Factor -4x squared minus 8x plus 5. Is there a greatest common factor between -4, -8, and 5? No, but there is one that I want to pull out. not just 1, but negative 1. Let's see what happens when I pull out a negative 1. Well, negative 4x squared becomes 4x squared because the negative and negative make a. The negative 8x divided by negative 1 would be plus 8x, and then we would have minus 5. Now, it is possible to do this with x squared being negative, but that means when we find the factors of, when we go to find the factors of negative 4x squared, we have to factor that negative in. We have to take it into account. But if I factor it out, well, the 4x squared is now positive, yes? So now it's pretty much the exact same thing we did previously. We just had to pull that out. So I can go into the next step and we can say negative in our 2 sets of parentheses. So to find the signs, we look at the third term. Since it's negative, the signs are opposite, because if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, like it is here, the signs are opposite. Now that brings us to the factors of the first and third term. Factors of 4x squared. 1 and 4 are 2 and 2, but we do know we'll have x and x. Factors of 5. And that's it, so we can just throw down 1 and 5. Doesn't really matter which order we put them in, we'll just put them in, check it, and see if we get it in the right order. We can do 2 and 2. And then we can check. 2x times negative 5 would be 1 times 2x is plus 2x, which would give us negative. Is that what we wanted? Here, either would work because we have 2x and 2x, yes? So if I switch the signs, well, it would make the 1 negative and the 5 positive because, well, since both 2x's, it really doesn't change it. So here we can do that. But I think the better one to stick with, if we're going to stick with one, is going to be to change the signs. Because as we saw yesterday, if we don't have 2x and 2x, if those aren't the exact same, flipping the 1 and 5 would not actually change the sign of what we want. It would change the number entirely. Here, it just worked out conveniently because of the 2x and 2x. So we could switch the 1 and 5 and get the same result, or we can switch the signs. Switching the signs will work every time. Switching the numbers won't. Questions on this here? Be ready for the next one. Negative 9x squared minus 3x plus 2. What would we do first? So we can factor out a negative 1, yes? So we can say negative parentheses. Well, the 9x squared would go from negative to positive. The negative 3x would go from negative to, and the 2 would become. Now, if there had actually been a greatest common factor of, like, say, 2, could I pull out a negative 2 from everything? Well, yeah, we can pull out the negative and the 2, or whatever the greatest common factor is. The main reason we're pulling out the negative is because we want this a term, the first term, to be positive. It makes it work better, especially with the steps that we have. Because if we left it there, when we start finding the factors of 9x squared, we would have to take negative 1 and 9, negative 9 and 1, negative 3 and 3, and 3 and negative 3. We have to take every case. But removing it removes that. And also with our signs, as I know this comes up normally, since we have -2 here, we don't have to actually consider the case of 1 times -2 or -2 times 1. Because again, in step 2, not step 2, step 3, when we find the sign, since it's negative, the signs are positive and negative. They're opposite, yes? Well, the factors of -2 is either -2 and 1 or -1 and 2. The signs would be opposite. Did we already just take care of that? That's what's also nice with this. We don't have to think about that. Because when we get to step 4 and we're looking at the factors of the first and third term, I'm just looking at the number itself. I'm not having to worry about the signs. So 9x squared, well, we know for certain it's going to be x and, well, 9 is 1 and 9 or factors of 2, huh? 3 and 3? And then 1 and when we check it, 3x times -2 is 1 times 3x is plus, and -6x plus 3x is -3x. Need to switch the signs. Minus. So that is our answer. Now on these here, especially the homework and on the test, if you lose that negative sign, you will lose points. Because if we multiply it out without the negative sign, we only, let's get a highlighter. It would only actually give us this equation here. Is that what we started with? Well, no, we started with the -9x squared minus 3x plus 2. So without that negative, it's not the original problem. If we, like on the first one where we pulled out the 8, if you don't include that 8 in the answer, it's going to be marked not completely wrong, but you're going to lose points because we need the original equation. Okay. Well, any other questions on this here? Do we feel comfortable with this? Awesome. Because that's all we have is just more of these, and that's it. Now, what we'll be looking at tomorrow, and I'll put that back up here, is utilizing this, the fact that we can factor these down to get two things multiplied together. We want to solve it. And you may or may not remember this from last chapter when I talked about solving quadratics, because we're trying to find what value of x will make this function equal what? 0. We're trying to see when it equals 0, yes? Wait a minute, I have two things multiplied together equals 0. If I say a times b equals 0, what does a or b have to be? 0. The only way that we can multiply two things to get 0 is if one of them is, wait a minute, I just took an equation, now it's two things being multiplied together, yes? So one of them has to be. And that's what we're going to delve into tomorrow in working with that. So this here is your assignment, and we are done for today.